Hello, and welcome to the Wilson's Disease 2023 meeting. It's my pleasure to start off. My name is Fred Askari, the Director of the Wilson's Disease Center of Excellence at Michigan Medicine, and today is October 20th, 2023. First, I'd like to go over my disclosures because I'm involved with a number of companies doing research in Wilson disease. These include Orphalon doing clinical trials research funding, Vet clinical trials research funding, Ultragenics clinical trials research funding, ArborMed is a consultant, Alexion AstraZeneca Wilson Therapeutics clinical trial research funding, and advisory boards as above. In terms of questions and answers, we'll take those at the conclusion of my presentation, and I'll try and answer some questions live. Scroll down beneath the player window and submit your questions on the form. And please don't wait until the end to do so. Submit your questions as they occur to you, and we'll do our best to answer as many as possible. So in terms of the year in review, there were two big gene therapy trials underway in Wilson disease, one from Vet and one from Ultragenics. And these are very exciting. Alexion 1840 drug development was terminated by AstraZeneca. And this was the choline salt of tetrathiomolybdate. Obviously, that's a more disappointing development. And then another big highlight I'm just going to touch briefly on is that Orphalon has launched Cuprior in the US, which is a different formulation of trientine, and they're involved in a clinical trial to further understand usefulness of serum copper assays in standard of care patients. So this is an illustration of what goes on with gene therapy. An AAV vector, in this case, for what's being studied in Wilson disease, is manufactured by one of these two companies, Ultragenics or Vet, and they both use slightly different subtypes of adeno-associated virus, and they both use slightly different gene inserts for the adenovirus vector. And here it's infused through a peripheral IV. The whole process takes under an hour, and the vector then goes through the blood, enters the liver, and then starts making protein. In this case, in this illustration, which I took from a ASGT teaching project, a functional factor 8 or 9 is being made and excreted in the blood to treat hemophilia, and hemophilia gene therapies have been approved already. So we're excited that Wilson disease is being studied following on these successes. As you can see from this illustration, the clotting factors circulate in the blood. In the case of Wilson's disease, the ATP7B gene is just going to stay right in the liver. Actually makes it a little simpler. In terms of the Alexion 1840 study, that was with choline tetrathiomolybdate, and Wilson Therapeutics was sold to Alexion and then sold again to AstraZeneca in 2021. And these are the companies that have really championed development of this through the clinical trials phases. It turned out that the FDA is interested in further mechanistic studies, and Alexion unfortunately told us that they're not going forward with further studies. And so the program was, the drug development program was terminated during the extension phase of the study, much to the disappointment of many people involved in the study. Obviously, not the least of which were the people at these companies, I might add. There's a phase 3 trial data that showed a lot of promise. Unfortunately, there just wasn't a path forward to getting the drug approved by the FDA that was expeditious. Alexion, the good news is Alexion is committed to publishing multiple further papers and sharing data from the choline TTM studies, so please stay tuned. Another exciting development has been that Orphalon has introduced Cuprior, which is a variant of trientine, if you will. The trientine that we're most familiar with in this country is cyprine, or its generic equivalents, and that's trientine dihydrochloride. In this case, Cuprior is a trientine tetrahydrochloride, so it's what's considered a novel compound in that sense. It's more stable at room temperature. From a patient perspective, it comes in 300 milligram tablets versus 250 milligram tablets, so may require some dose changes, or will require some dose changes in order to, line up similar doses. And Orphalon is also committed as part of the drug development for Cuprior to develop a better serum assay for copper, and they're currently doing a real life clinical trial in standard of care patients to see if this assay performs as well as it did in the clinical trials, and will be useful as a way of monitoring patients clinically going forward. So there's a bright future coming down the road for Wilson disease patients. Obviously, the current treatments are available, and now we have a question of whether there will be further choline TTM trials. We know it's not going to come from Alexion AstraZeneca, but there may be another company at some point that picks this up. We don't know. Obviously, it's a large expense and may have a smaller target population to treat, so that makes it more difficult than the ambitious projects that Alexion and Wilson Therapeutics and AstraZeneca funded for many years. Right now, we're on the horizon is the next phase of the gene therapy trials, and we'll be hearing more about this later today from Vivette and from Ultragenyx, and obviously these are very exciting developments. I can't talk excessively about the data, obviously, because these trials are ongoing and I haven't seen it all. So suffice it to say that I think things are going well and things look quite promising at this point. The trials are going forward. There are also some new medications in preclinical studies, and this is an area of great optimism in the future too, because we may see very, very exciting other compounds come to clinical trials in the not too distant future. And so with that, I'd like to close and take any questions that may be on people's minds.
So if you have questions, you can cue them by scrolling down on your screen and entering them in the chat, clicking on the chat box. It's really been wonderful of the WDA to put together this meeting, and I want to thank them, obviously, for their significant effort and time and care in putting together the Wilson's disease conference. These conferences are wonderful because they get us all to get together, virtually and chat about Wilson disease, which is so important to all of us. Not seeing any questions in the chat just yet, but I can further discuss some of the updates for the year. Obviously, we're very excited about the gene therapy projects and how they're going. And we're excited about, the new monitoring system too from Orphalon that's coming out. So there are a few other things I would like to say in terms of updates for the year that perhaps aren't as happy as others. We lost Mary Graper, who made some wonderful contributions to Wilson disease this year, and I'd like to acknowledge all of those. She was a dear friend and board member and past president, one of the main liaisons. But I think one of her biggest contributions was really trying to get improved access to medication, the medications that are already approved. Talk about the future and what is coming out, but she was really committed in a passionate way to being sure that people could get the medications that they wanted and needed, both here and overseas. And so we're all going to miss her a lot and carry on with her with her, care that she provided and her vision and guidance for the organization. We have a question coming up in the chat saying, I've been taking an over-the-counter zinc gluconate for 2 months before I was confirmed, as we yet not started other treatment. Can you start with Cuprior? Well, Cuprior is approved. Cuprior is that trientine tetrahydrochloride, and it's a FDA approval indications say it's for people who've been decoppered already. And so someone who's initially being treated right now, their packaging label says, they don't have that indication. So, and we actually have to, when we're prescribing it, test that someone has been decoppered. So I think that for right now, the answer to that is unfortunately, in theory, you could start with it, but I don't think you can access it very well because of the companies pursuing restrictions along with their FDA guidance. In terms of over-the-counter options to treat, the zinc gluconate is the main over-the-counter option. The Wilson Disease Association partnered with Extreme V so that they'd be aware when they're manufacturing it to have very tight tolerances in their zinc gluconate, and that product is called Bluzin, that over-the-counter zinc. So in theory, any zinc that's bioavailable should work. The problem is that some of these may not have the same tight quality control and stringency that you would like when you're treating a disease that's potentially fatal if left untreated. So, so that's the main over-the-counter recommendation, and that again was something Mary Graper works so diligently to see to it that there was an accessible, more reasonably priced over-the-counter zinc option that people could turn to if they had trouble with their insurance coverage. There's a question about have there been any issues for people getting insurance coverage for Cuprior, and obviously, as with any medication, insurance coverage is an issue, particularly a medication like the ones we use to treat Wilson disease often require prior authorizations. The company also has a patient assistance program, so in the event that insurance coverage isn't as robust as people would like, people have been able to access the medication that way as well. And then there's a question here, what if someone wonders if they would be a good candidate for the gene therapy trials? What should they do? Any more details on the assay and how it might impact patient care? Well, in terms of, if you're interested in participating in the gene therapy trials, there are many sites enrolling patients throughout the country. Dr. Shilsky obviously at Yale's enrolling in one of the gene therapy trials, and there are centers in Chicago and here in Ann Arbor, obviously, and then UCLA and several other centers throughout the country. So you can go to clinicaltrials.gov and phone the study coordinators and see if they're if they can chat with you about the trial. You can also read more information about the trial, but I encourage you to reach out to one of the centers. A study coordinator is a person who's trained on the study and knows about this study and is able to communicate very quickly about it. I'm also happy obviously to see anyone who's interested in the gene therapy trials in clinic and chat with them face to face about it. But there is a screening and enrollment process. In terms of the assay, the assay basically one of the problems we have with monitoring people on copper reduction therapy, regardless of the type of copper reduction therapy someone is on, is to monitor whether it's effective, and we're not over treating someone or under treating someone with making them copper deficient. And so some of the tools we use currently to do that are total serum copper, ceruloplasmin measures, calculations of non-ceruloplasmin or free copper. You'll hear those terms. And then 24-hour urine copper. There's also some study of an assay called an exchangeable copper assay. So you'll hear that term as well. But what this is going to be is a more precise measure of copper, so that we can see more precisely that free copper component. Because part of the problem with the current assays is they're just not as precise, and so we wind up getting sometimes copper numbers that are negative, and in the serum assays, and obviously a person really doesn't have a negative copper, they have copper in them, because copper is an essential trace element, so we know they have copper. But we get negative numbers, which are impossible, and things like that make it much harder to adjust and monitor dosing based off those assays. So these new assays, we're hoping, will be more precise and provide more reliable information for monitoring Wilson disease. And I might add, there's another assay that Alexion was developing as well, and they hope to make available. One of the other nice things that did come out of that trial, which was disappointing that it was, the development of that drug was stopped. But there was an assay that was developed, and they're partnering with Mayo Clinic to bring that out as well. What is the timeline for the new drug that doesn't require refrigeration being available? Well, there are several drugs that don't require refrigeration right now. One is penicillamine, one is zinc, and then the third one is this Cuprior. So they are available. Those are available, and the Cuprior is the trientine tetrahydrochloride. And then will it be more or less expensive than what is currently available? I think that the goal of the company is to make the drug accessible with copay assistance and with patient assistance programs, and so the hope is that it won't be more expensive out of pocket to you. And I don't really know precisely how they're pricing the product, although they tell me that it'll be comparable. It's priced comparable as Cyprine. Whether that's again, I don't know their precise pricing. Pricing of pharmaceuticals is very, very complicated because of discounts and other issues with insurance coverage. What additional information from the Alexion program might be shared that you're excited to learn about, and why? Well, the Alexion program, I think, is something we'd be very excited to see. More data coming out on how people improved neurologically on the drug. There was a lot of positive data that came out of it, and that, I think, gave people a lot of hope, and still gives me a lot of hope that this drug may well, even though it wasn't pursued now, may well actually have some be a wonderful model that we can have better treatments than the ones we have today if we can get a drug that will muster up to FDA approval. So, many patients that were in the trial, at least at my site, I know, were very disappointed when the study closed because they felt they were doing so well on the drug. So I think documentation of that will be important. Obviously, you'll hear perhaps even some data later today from other speakers about the mechanism of action of the drug, and which was one of the stumbling blocks to getting it approved, or the main stumbling block to getting it approved. And I think that data will be very important if there's going to be a path forward for this compound for some patients. There's a question: is gene therapy a one-time treatment or ongoing? Well, in this instance, we're talking that what current gene therapies are AAV, adeno-associated virus vector-derived vectors. And so it's not the whole virus, it's just the shell of the virus that gets the gene therapy into the liver. And at this point, that's one of the questions that's being answered in the clinical trial. We know from other studies with AAV vectors that, a guesstimate would be maybe it'll last for 6 years, but we still don't know that, definitively that it works, and we have to be sure we understand how well it works. That data is all being analyzed. Very exciting. Let me put it that way. But it's still being analyzed and collected for how long it will last. So there might have to be a second dose in 6 years. There also are, the term gene therapy is very broad. There are, a number of other gene correction strategies and gene treatment strategies that are under development. So one day it may be that it's a one-time treatment, but for right now, these vectors were hoping that the treatment might last for 6 years, but we're still obviously studying whether it's effective or not, how effective it is, and so forth. There's a question about side effects of the new tetra hydrochloride trientine. Are they the same as the dihydrochloride or the cyprine and its generic equivalents? Yeah, the answer to that question is yes, we think so. The side effects we anticipate would be the same, so we'd be worried about watching for neurologic deterioration, particularly in people early on treated, watching for arthritic syndromes, allergic reactions, rashes, and things of that nature, kidney problems, and so forth. But I think for the most part, it's well tolerated, similar to the trientine dihydrochloride. And I might add, it's been used, while it's new to this country, it's been used, and we have an international audience, it's been used in Europe for a while. So we do have some longer, lead on time in terms of the side effects and so forth. There's another question. Someone who's had Wilson disease for 40 years or more and still has some problems. Why is this happening? Yeah, I think the main issue is there's two issues. One is why does someone still have any symptoms if they've been treated with copper reduction therapy? And the answer to that question is there can be, permanent damage. So, there's copper in the brain, for example, and if it's injured, parts of the brain that can't heal, that's one reason why people could have symptoms. And then the second reason, obviously, is if they haven't gotten enough copper out, and that is why this Alexion 1840 is choline tetrathiomolybdate, if you will, was so exciting because we were hoping we would be getting more copper out. It's very hard to study how much copper you get out of the brain, and that's part of the challenge in developing treatments for that. So I think that's something that, we'll stay tuned with the gene therapy trials and so forth as well. But we still have hope too. And if people have ongoing symptoms like psychiatric and neurologic symptoms, it's really important that they see doctors who can treat those symptoms as well and not just be focused exclusively on the copper levels, although it's important those are kept in a safe range. There's some questions about connectivity. I'll defer those to others. And again, another question about why do people who've gone through chelation therapy not recover fully? And again, I think we've addressed that. The over-the-counter zinc, someone asked how to spell it, Gluzin, Gluzin. It's on the Wilson Disease Association website as well. I think there are links to it. So I direct you. The Wilson Disease Association website is a treasure trove of information, and probably even find more information about how to get more information about the gene therapy trials there, but that would be a good resource for people who have a lot of FAQs about Wilson disease, and I direct you back there. We're coming low on time, but I'll keep going as long as we have a few more minutes. And there's someone who's reasserting that not every zinc that you would want to get 50 milligrams 3 times a day of zinc from over the counter has it. So they're agreeing with that discussion. And they say, if you don't qualify for a gene therapy trial, does that mean you won't qualify for the other one? No, there are 2 gene therapy trials. And one of the exciting things about it is that, you can get this therapy when we screen for it. We're screening for antibodies and screening for inclusion-exclusion criteria. So you may be eligible for one gene therapy study and not the other one. It's possible you're eligible for both, and you pick from one or the other. But that, if you've been turned down for one study, that doesn't mean that you're not eligible for the other study potentially. There are some exclusion criteria that overlap between the two. In the beginning, they don't want to treat people who are very, very sick with liver disease, in particular, very sick livers. They don't want to study the gene therapy in those people. So I know that's disappointing for some people who want to try the gene therapy, but that's just the situation with the clinical trials and FDA and so forth. There's some questions about international sites for gene therapy trials, and thank you, for asking that. Again, you can look at the company websites. There are other sites coming up in other countries. I think both countries wanted to, companies wanted to start their trials first in the U.S., but there are international sites coming online as well in the future.
Okay, Dr. Askari, it's time for us to wrap up.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I see that we have many more questions, and I apologize we didn't get to all of them, but thank you all for asking such great questions. And I really appreciate the Wilson's Association. Thank you.